Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Shaw, and today I will be joined by Haize at CEO Haize on Twitter, the co-host of the Locked On Bulls podcast and the solo host of the Chicago Bulls Central podcast to talk everything Zach LaVine, his free agency, who he currently is as a player, where he ranks in the greater NBA pecking order of stars, and what he would look like as a New York Knick. All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline now with more odds, props, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen. As always, we are now available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know, as promised, we have a very special guest today. I am joined by Haize at CEO Haize on Twitter, the new co-host of the Locked On Bulls podcast and the solo host of the Chicago Bulls Central podcast. You can catch both of those wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Haize, man, welcome to the show. I'm a big fan of the work you've been doing since taking over at Locked On Bulls, and we're going to talk about a guy that I've long been a big fan of today, Zach LaVine. Let's get right into it. What are your initial impressions following his exit interview comments on where he's at heading into free agency?
You know, a lot of Bulls Nation took those comments as like panic, and I just took them as, hey, it was smart business. Everything he said, looking at it, it was smart to say. It was leaving the door open to say, hey, you know, I love the city of Chicago, but I got to go and whatever's best for me. But I think looking at everything, it makes more sense for him to return to Chicago than anything else. And I do have faith that Zach LaVine's coming back.
All right, coming off a monster season is Zach LaVine, 24.5 points per game, 4.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds. Just flat out one of the most efficient high volume scorers in the NBA, 48% from the field, 39% from three, elite free throw shooter, has shored up some of the weak points of his game. I think there's a case to be made that he's as desirable as anyone in NBA free agency who could theoretically actually change teams this year. And we'll circle back on the odds of him actually leaving the Bulls, but I kind of want to get a feel. Where do you think he is in the NBA pecking order at this point? Because obviously despite those monster numbers, he took a little bit of a backseat to DeMar DeRozan this year, and DeMar DeRozan emerged as a legitimate MVP candidate. Would you consider him like a top 15 guy in the league, top 25 guy in the league? Where is he in your mind at this point?
I definitely think top 25. I think that while his numbers dip some after the thumb and the back and the knee, but I think people forget too that early in the season, probably the first 25 or if not more games in the season, his numbers were right up there with DeMar's, and his efficiency was even higher than what the season ended up finishing at. And so I definitely think he can be top 25. One of the things that can get him even further to that, if we want to talk about getting him into the top 15, at that point, it is an offense. It's not turning the ball over in crunch time, which he does have a problem of doing so at times, but it's being always locked in defensively. We've seen from Zach LaVine, when he is locked in on the defensive side, he's a pretty solid defender. He's just not always locked in. If he can make that a more permanent part of his game, I think Zach LaVine can easily become a top 20, top 15 player in the league, but we have to see it done. At 27 years old, do we see it become that? That question remains to be seen, but when Zach is locked in defensively, he's put together some nice defensive stretches.
Yeah, and I think that's always been the conversation with him, right? And I think it's this weird thing because like he comes into the NBA with the Timberwolves and he's just seen as like a pure dunker, right? Like he's this monster athlete, but not a real player. Like because that Wolves team was never taken seriously. Gets traded to Chicago, emerges as again like an incredible offensive player, an incredible scorer. He's gotten better and better and better year after year on that end. But he was just so disastrously bad on defense that people, I think, at least outside of Chicago, didn't really take him seriously. Like when you had those conversations, like who are the dudes in the NBA? Like who are the guys who can contribute to winning on a really high level, at least as a central part of a team? Zach was not put in those conversations. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Haize, but at the very least, he's gotten closer to respectability on that end of the floor this past year, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. He's gotten closer. Absolutely. I think that even the biggest Zach detractors would have to admit that he's taken some steps on that side for sure.
And what do you I mean, I guess you were hinting at this saying he's already 27 because it's this weird thing, right? Because he has all the athleticism in the world. And then I think when people see someone that athletic not be great on defense, they immediately go to effort and they're like, all right, he's not trying hard enough or he's not smart enough. And like, I think it just because defense is a little harder, like for us included, to understand than offense. I think people dumb down the conversation a little bit, but defense is so multifaceted, right? I mean, it is making reads upon reads upon reads. It's foot speed, it's coordination, it's who your teammates are, it's what scheme you're in. But all that being said, do you think he can still get better on that end of the floor? And like, what specifically in his game on defense does he have to work on to reach his heights there?
To me, it's the off the ball defense. That's where he gets lost at more times than not. And that's one of the things that Lonzo Ball did help him with. Lonzo's such a smart defender at reading what the other team's doing, and he communicates while he's out there on the floor. And that's why you saw Zach LaVine be a better defender earlier in the season when Lonzo was out there together. You know, Lonzo ended up playing 35 games this season. But I do think having better defenders that communicate do help him with that off the ball defense. But at the end of the day, it is something that he needs to look at himself and hopefully watch some tape at. And one thing about Zach LaVine, you know, as you pointed out, we've seen him become this complete offensive player that he's flirting with the elite offensive numbers of the 50, 40, 90 club. And we just want to see some of that attentiveness be put on the defensive end. I trust that he has the ability to do it. And if he can shore up that part of his game, the sky's the limit for Zach LaVine.
And where have you seen him improve offensively over the course of his Bulls tenure? Because again, it feels like every year he's made another jump, another jump, another jump. And then this past season, like I didn't think him and DeRozan was going to be a disaster or anything, but I'm surprised at how well he was able to mold his game to DeRozan's.
Yeah, I think that what we saw early in the season, again, before the health concerns, is that Zach's knew that he can get his shot off almost whenever he wanted to. He was picking his spot, so it's fine to let DeMar have the fourth quarters or let DeMar have a big first quarter or something like that. But then we saw Zach really picking his spots, taking over certain quarters, having quarters where he would score 15 points in a quarter, where maybe the quarter before it was only 4 points, and it was such a effortlessness to that it made it seem, or at that point, like, oh, Zach's going to have a monster season, because at this point now, Zach knows when to drive. When to get out in transition. That transition with him, Lonzo, on the court was beautiful. And also, I think what we've seen to answer your question, and what we've seen Zach take leaps with is his assists, is the fact of him knowing when to defer. And that's something, you know, people try to throw the ball hog label on Zach, and I think really he was the only offensive weapon so long for the Chicago Bulls. And we saw this season him freely give the ball up a little bit more than what he ever has at any other point in his career when he has more weapons around him as well.
Do you think people underrate just how efficient he is as a scorer? Because I think people get blown away by, I mean, again, still, even if it's declined a little bit after some of the injuries he's had, like just the dunking ability. But I watch him and he's just one of the best. Like, I remember, you know better than I would, but the game where I think maybe it was the Thunder, where he just pulled up with like 19 seconds left and drained that like 35.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like one of the great shot makers on planet Earth. And if I'm the Knicks, or if I'm another team that's going after him, and I mean, this isn't true for the Knicks, but maybe for another team that's a little closer to contention, like if you're looking at him as the final piece, like, I mean, how many, like, I mean, you just mentioned you think he's someone who could eventually get into that top 15 conversation. Like, to me, like, that's what would put him in there. Like, there aren't maybe more than 12 other guys on the planet who can make some of the shots that he can at the clip that he can. All right, guys, I want to continue this conversation on Zach LaVine and get a little bit more into the bigger picture of his free agency. What are the chances he could potentially end up a New York Knick? But if you want to put some money down on him ending up a Knick or a Bull or somewhere else, there's only one place to do it. It's betonline.net, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and this weekend's Run to the Roses as the Kentucky Derby is back. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. And I would head over there to put some money down on the Dallas Mavericks in Game 5 against the Phoenix Suns. I think the Mavs have kind of figured out the Suns team a little bit. They're playing with improved physicality. They're shooting the lights out of the ball. The Suns come in as 6-point favorites in Phoenix. I think the question is, can Dallas keep shooting at the crazy rate that they are? Maybe not, but I think they're the tougher team right now. And to me, at least, Phoenix outside of Devin Booker looks a little bit shook. We'll see if the Suns have an answer. I throw some money down on the Dallas Mavericks, though. So head to the website today, Bet Online, where the game starts.
Oh, for sure. Zach offensively, Zach is one of the most complete offensive players in the league.
Yeah.
And I think like people get so caught up in sometimes what he doesn't do that they and like I said, he makes it look effortless sometimes. That shot that you mentioned, he just pulled up and shot it and just kind of went about his business as if it was just a normal shot. Zach, when he's on, the offense is so fluid for him. That's why, it was tough to see how the ending of the season went, and then to find out like he was only working at 50% capacity on the knee. It made sense because that fluidity from his game was all but gone at that point. And so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, Zach offensively is one of the best offensive players in the NBA. And I think people don't look at, because it took a while for me too to get to start looking at efficiency numbers. And when you look at Zach's efficiency numbers, they're right up there with the best offensive players in the NBA.
We see the greats in the NBA, like when you think they can't top themselves in a certain respect, find a way to add something new. What do you think, at least offensively, and maybe it is just continuing to sharpen up that passing, but where can he still get better on that end of the floor?
It's the ball handling. Zach still has those issues where he dribbles the ball off his foot in crunch time, and it forces turnovers. That he can work on his ball handling. He can work on the decision making, like I said, down the stretch. Like sometimes in when the game gets tight late in games, Zach just does not make the right passes. As much as I said that his passing is kind of improved, he just doesn't, and he kind of forces it, or he makes passes. If he would have made it a little bit quicker, it would have been an easy pass. But because of that hesitation, sometimes it let defenders get in the right spot to try to steal the ball. I like to see him tighten up that part of his offensive game.
What's the relationship like between him and DeMar DeRozan, and how do you think those two like playing off of each other?
Oh, I think it's great. I think when just the fact that Zach deferred to DeMar as much as he has over the course of the season, DeMar came here to play with Zach LaVine, and the veteran leadership from DeMar Zach's needed as much as anybody else on the court. I think that relationship between those two is rock solid.
And I to your point, maybe a little bit of gamesmanship in his comments and I probably should have mentioned them at the top of the podcast, but something along the lines of like, I love Chicago. Like I'll always love Chicago. Got to keep my options open. Where do you think he's at on the Bulls experience as a whole? Because his first couple of years, I mean, at least in terms of winning, like obviously like a lot of frustration, a lot of challenges, like finding the right teammates around him, finding the right fits. And then it felt like at the beginning of this year, like it all came together, right? DeRozan was a supernova. And in some ways, I thought Lonzo was even more important than DeRozan was, at least to Zach's game, like with his ability to just be a guy who is always like his only goal, like whatever Lonzo Ball's faults are as a player, his only goal on the court offensively is to make everyone else better. And if that means he just touches the ball for 2 seconds at a time on offense, he's always going to make the next head-to-head pass. He's always going to make the next right play, and he's going to do it expeditiously. You throw in Caruso, like covering up for some of his flaws defensively. And I felt like he was all of a sudden on the perfect team for him. And we all sort of know how it went for Chicago, like a million injuries, like finished with a negative point differential on the year, like get mostly just bullied by Milwaukee, like a string of horrible health. Like LaVine doesn't even get to finish the season because he's in COVID protocols. Where is he at on Chicago as a whole as we wrap up? I mean, it's crazy, right? It's 5 seasons for him there right now, right?
Yeah. I think if Garpax was still in the front office, it would be no question that Zach LaVine was leaving. I think AK and Eversley coming in, showing right away that they're here to improve the team, that they're there to build around Zach. Heck, you got to look at it this way. The front office gave up 4 first-round picks to put a better team around Zach LaVine heading into his contract year. That shows you the faith that they have in him. Even AK saying in his presser, that Zach LaVine's knee is not going to factor into his unrestricted free agency. I think that the relationship here in Chicago was rock solid. And I think because of the new regime that came in and that proved, hey, we're going to do whatever we can to get us as close to contention as humanly possible.
And I guess that being said, maybe this is going bigger picture on it, but what would you say the odds are of Zach LaVine re-signing in Chicago at this point?
I would say, and this is just me being fair, but I'm putting it at 70-30. 70% he returns, the 30% chance that he leaves. When you look at the other teams out there, if Zach truly wants to win, the Bulls still out of the teams that have cap space, unless another team all of a sudden creates some cap space, the Bulls give him the best chance to win. If it's money, The Bulls can give him way more money than anybody else can if he plans on signing the full 5-year deal. Now, there is something to be said of him signing a 2+1 with the chance of getting back to free agency earlier to get even more money. But with his knee concerns being 27, that may not be likely. But if that is something that's kind of in their back pocket, then that changes some things with going to another team if it's a short-term deal. But I fully expect him to be back with Chicago.
All right, so we'll play in fantasy land for a little bit. So let's just say the Knicks, like Zach LaVine decides, hey, I want to be a Knick. Even though, to your point, if contention is his main priority, the Knicks do not currently, I would say, offer him a much better chance of doing that than the Chicago Bulls. At best, it would be an equivalent situation, depending on who the Knicks can put around him. But that being said, is there anyone on the Knicks who would interest you in a potential sign-in trade for Zach LaVine? I think the first name that I would pitch would be Emmanuel Quickly, just because I remember going back to Lonzo Ball's free agency. I thought those two guys would be such a great fit off each other, and obviously not in the same universe yet as Zach LaVine is an offensive player, but much younger guy, making a lot less money, and brings some stuff at least, or showed flashes of some stuff in a similar vein in terms of self-creation and deep three-point shooting.
Yeah, Quickly it would be one of the ones that I'd be interested in. Also, I think at a base, we got to start with RJ Barrett too. So RJ Barrett is somebody who, while I'm not saying can come in right away and replace what Zach LaVine does, but I like RJ Barrett. Still only 20 years old, had his best season so far, averaging over 20 points per game. I really, if Zach was saying, hey, I want to go to the Knicks, I'm going to the Knicks regardless. Let's work something out that works for both teams. A deal that starts off with RJ Barrett and possibly Quickly. If we can get both of those players, I'm down for that. Now I'm probably being a little stingy, but I'll definitely be down for that.
I mean, I think it's the catch 22 for all of us, right? You want to get great players, you don't want to give up great players to do it. And I think that's the conundrum for the Knicks. They're trying to find a way. How can they get that guy next to RJ Barrett, obviously, without giving up RJ Barrett in the process? And it's easier said than done. But in a hypothetical world, which not a world you want to live in, but maybe a world a lot of people listening, at least the Knicks fans listening, will want to live in. If the Knicks can find a way, maybe even if it's a different team, offload the money, gets Zach LaVine back for not a ton. How do you think he profiles as basically like the number one guy in the Knicks? And to me, he's such a clean fit in New York, because it's kind of the same pitch for why RJ Barrett could eventually like succeed as the number one, because the Knicks have done a very good job of basically putting together a complete good team without the number one player just yet. And maybe that's RJ down the road, maybe that's Quickly down the road. But you look at what LaVine would be surrounded by. It's similar to like the infrastructure the Bulls have given him, where there are just a lot of other really good perimeter defenders. Quentin Grimes projects as a plus guy in the perimeter. Emmanuel Quickly has turned himself into a very solid defender. Mitchell Robinson, one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. And the Knicks just have like a whole lot of length and size and tough dudes coming off the bench. And I think LaVine could be almost a better version, obviously at a different position, of what Julius Randle did 2 years ago as a hyper efficient fulcrum operating around guys that just really want to kick ass on defense and have a lot more offensive talent than the Knicks of 2 years ago.
Yeah, and it gives you automatically it's going to send your offense as a total. Looking at if everything works and gels right, that would make the Knicks a dangerous offensive team with the already defensive weapons. At that point, you would have to re-sign Mitchell Robinson as well, just to give that interior defense. That's a nice team. I won't even lie. That'd be a nice team to watch.
All right, guys, we're going to take one final break. We'll come back. We'll talk about what the Chicago Bulls could be if they hit their ceiling with Zach LaVine and what the ideas of building around him as a player. But first, I want to tell you, if you want to get big and strong like Zach LaVine, there's only one way to do it. You got to go eat some Built Bars. Built Bars are the best. They're healthy and delicious, and you don't have to sacrifice taste for the health. Because with Built Bar, you can have both. They're 100% covered in real chocolate, and that's true for Built Bars and Built Puff. That means with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And have you tried the Puffs yet? They're amazing. We're going crazy over them. They come in flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. Who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? And they're only 140 calories, so I mean, sign me up. If there's not enough flavor for you, you might want to try the Mix Box. The Mix Box comes with 12 flavors of bars and puffs. Built Bar makes sure there is something for everyone. They are 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar. That's the big thing for me. And they still taste great. 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You can compare that to a candy bar, normally 240 calories, about 30 grams of sugar, a whole different ballgame there, and dozens of net carbs. So go to built.com to get all your favorites: banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, so many more. The delicious and new flavors are coming out all the time. So check them out at built.com. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. You know, we convinced DeAndre Ayton, if we're playing in Fantasy World, maybe even get an upgrade there. All right, but we'll wrap up on a much better note for you, Haize. Fantasy World for the Chicago Bulls. What do you think what is the best case scenario for this Bulls team? Is that it's almost weirder with the Knicks because they're not as far along and they're younger. But the question you're always asking when you're in the middle of the pack in the NBA, like, how do we get out of the cycle of mediocrity? And the Bulls made a pretty big jump this year, right? They went from the very low end of that cycle where you're constantly picking 8, 9, 10, 11 in the draft to the higher end of that cycle where for a good chunk of the year, they were the best team in the East and they looked like a legit contender to, at the very least, make the second round, maybe make the Eastern Conference Finals. And as we said, injuries caught up with them and they lost a little bit of that magic they had earlier in the season. Do you think they would be content to just run it back and say, hey, we're going to bet on internal development for a guy like Patrick Williams? We're going to bet on a healthy season for Lonzo Ball. We're going to bet that wasn't a one-off for DeMar DeRozan and he's at least one more season like that in him and see what we can do? Or did that just kind of brutal loss against the Milwaukee Bucks sort of throw water at their face and say, hey, at least, like this core, I don't know what the ceiling on it is.
Well, no, I mean, even listening to the ending pressers, almost everyone from front office to the players talked about continuity. So I think the starting five for sure is running back with Alex Caruso, with Ayo Dosunmu coming off the bench, but I think almost everything else off the bench may change. Javonte Green, I hope, comes back as well because he has a nice deal. But if a move comes along where the Bulls need to match a little bit of salary, I can also see Javonte Green being thrown in there. I think we're going to see a completely revamped bench from the Chicago Bulls. They have their full mid-level exception. They have a trade player exception worth up to $6 million that they can have until August to use. And then veteran minimum players. I think they're going to look to really revamp that bench with players that are more consistent defensively, that can score some, and then who are just more trusted and that what you get out. One of the things that hurt us even at the beginning of the season when we were playing well is that we would have games where our starting lineup would give us such great production, but we'd have like 8 points total coming off the bench. So I think that they're going to focus on revamping that bench, giving a more solid bench. But I do expect the starting five, like I said, plus Alex Caruso, Ayo Dosunmu, to really be back, and then everything else kind of change around that.
What do you think is the best case finish for the Bulls next year?
I have to wait to see the way the roster works out. I think if the Bulls don't get into at least 50 to 53 wins next year, not enough was done. I definitely think looking at how they honestly should have probably had over 50 wins this season, but it took a historic fall with only getting 8 wins after the All-Star break for that not to happen. But I definitely think the Bulls need to be aiming for that 50 to 55 win mark next season if they make all their improvements that I think they're going to make. Plus health. Health is
the Bulls coming off an amazing season, looking to put together another one. Haize, thanks so much for joining me, man. Can you tell everyone real quick one more time where to find all your work?
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me personally at CEO Haize. That's CEOHAIZE. You can also follow me at Locked On Bulls with my co-host Pat the Designer. And then if you want to see my solo Chicago Bulls show, it's Chicago Bulls Central. Make sure you put Chicago Bulls Central. There's another channel called Bulls Central. Do Chicago Bulls Central. You'll find me there as well.
All right, check it out right in that Chicago. We'll talk to you soon, Haize, and we'll be back soon on Locked On Knicks. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we got a full week of great episodes for you guys. So we'll be back soon. Until then, be good. Peace out.
Peace, y'all.